It looks like 36 connected so far. It's good. Okay, we will, wait a minute, gotta read. City Council special meeting, Monday, April 20th. City Council, first thing, I need approval of the agenda.
So moved?
Second?
Seconded by Robin. All in favor?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, we need a roll call.
Pardon?
From, as far as the attendance, the council in attendance.
Roll call, please.
Okay. Council President Benefield,
Yes.
Councilor Ridley,
Yes.
Councilor Ogilvy,
Yes.
Councilor McCarthy,
Yes.
Mayor Stidle.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, for those who are accustomed to our meetings, we have a public comment, but because of the current situation, public comment must be virtual and have been submitted by noon today. Anybody who wishes to make comments, please avoid trying to contact us during the meeting. Any questions you have will be sent to us after the meeting, and we will address during the next meeting. Am I correct with all that, Ashley? Okay, so with that, we only have one really good discussion tonight, and we're going to get into it. And it's a business resident relief discussion. Bruce, do you want to start us off?
Yes, sir. Thank you. There's really two components to this discussion tonight. The first is a discussion of a business grant program, and the other is about a request to defer TLT payments that have been collected by the hoteliers, but have not been paid. So the first one, dealing with the grant program, there has been discussion about $302,000 that is currently in the reserve for TAF. And I think there will be discussion tonight by the council as to whether or not there would be a legitimate use of those funds to be able to go ahead and construct a grant program. The other part is well, some folks have asked to defer, some people just haven't paid. But we're probably collected about 20% or less of the amount of payment that was due on April 15th for the quarter that started at the beginning of January and went to the end of March. Those payments are due April 15th. We have had requests and discussion about deferral. And then, but as I said, there are a number of agencies that have not filed at all. Some have filed and said, this is how much I owe you, but we are not sending a check. So I think that's where the discussion comes in on the deferral payments. If you defer, then that's fine. If you don't defer, then there are some consequences for paying tax. That's all. It's my general comment, Sam, unless you want me to go into more detail on one or the other.
No, let's take them one at a time. I think if Ashley could summarize what she was telling us about the legalities of being straightforward with a grant process and kind of how it fits so the public kind of understands it.
Sure. Do you want me to start with use of the funds, so the 70%, 30%, or just the criteria? Okay. So these are restricted funds. So under state law, there's only very limited uses the city can make of the funds. So when the tax is collected, you guys have a 8% transient lodging tax that's collected from tourists. So as Bruce was talking about before, these are funds that go from tourists, ideally straight to the city with the hotels being just intermediaries. So they are compensated 5% for administrating the tax, for collecting this tax and then holding it and giving it back to the city. City of Cannon Beach has a large portion of its 8% that is unrestricted. That goes right to the general fund. The money that we are looking to use for this program is part of a 1% tax, 1% of the 8% that is restricted. So a portion of that, I'm sorry?
Betsy, if I can just stop for a second. I think if you would slow down, the audio system would make your voice more clear to the rest of us.
Okay, thank you for that feedback. We're all getting used to Zoom. So we're looking at restricted funds. These funds can only be used for two purposes, either tourism promotion or to fund a tourist-related facility. Tourist-related facilities are also very narrowly defined under state law. They're either a visitor center, a convention center, a conference center, or a facility that has a useful life of 10 years or more, so it's improved real property, has a useful life of 10 years or more, and has a substantial purpose of serving tourists. So to be eligible for these funds, the businesses have to make a showing that they are, the substantial reason they exist is to provide a service to tourists. So once that showing, that is what I would call the threshold showing to be eligible for these funds, that you exist to serve tourists. After that, the city should develop a neutral and objective list of criteria. And those criteria basically will guide, the policy decisions the city council is looking to, the policy objectives the city council is looking to serve with this grant funding. So, what those criteria are is going to be a policy decision by city council. My advice is that they just be very clear and that they be, neutral, that you're not looking to benefit, one class of residents or one class of businesses over another.
Very good. So, council, time to talk about it. If the grant, go ahead, Ashley.
Sorry, I want to clarify one part of what I just said. So the criteria need to be neutral. You can make a policy decision in order to, you can make a policy decision. These funds would just go to hotels or just go to restaurants or just go to cafes. But within those, you just want to have clear criteria and then apply the criteria in a neutral fashion. So I'm sorry, I think I misspoke. You can benefit one business above another. That's a policy decision you can make. But once you've established the criteria, you need to apply the criteria in a neutral fashion.
Thank you. So my sense of it is the council needs to be pretty clear with the criteria that we want to put forward on how we would do this. So that the staff has the ability to formulate some sort of process that will get it done as quickly as we can possibly do it. We have a document that the staff gave us that kind of outlined some requirements, qualifications for who would apply, how they would apply, maybe. My take on it is we have to define what a tourist related industry is compared to non-tourism. That would be first in my decision-making process. I think obviously hotels, restaurants, and gift shops are clear. From there, we have some clarification to make on other items. We've got um, nonprofit organizations like the theater and some other function organizations that might be able to apply because they do the same thing. They draw tourists to town. But from my understanding of what Ashley was saying is that it's the facility that is important. So I don't know, if somebody had a business of entertaining on the street, that might not quite qualify as something to be a facility. Maybe a storefront is required. I don't know. Not knowing clearly all the businesses we have. And I'm sure the chamber could help us clarify who would be qualified. I'm just rambling here. I need other people to talk.
I'm happy to chime in at this point, Sam. So what I'm really hearing is it's the facility rather than the service. Is that correct?
So it's both. So my recommendation is on the application, we write out the threshold criteria. And the threshold criteria, it has to be improved real property with a useful life of 10 years or more. So yes, generally that would include some sort of building. And that building has a substantial purpose of serving tourists. So what I would suggest is that on the application, we are very clear that this is the threshold question and that applicants need to show that they meet that criteria. So, show that you are a facility, that you are improved real property that's designed to last for a long time. And then you need to be able to show that you substantially serve tourists. So if you're a restaurant or cafe, what percentage of your profits come from people that do not live within Clatsop County, do not live within the Cannon Beach zip code? What percentage of the number of people that come into your facility are tourists rather than locals? The onus would be on the applicant to be able to make that showing. And then once they make that showing, they would be eligible to receive the grant. Does that make sense?
Question, Ashley. One of the application requirements kind of asks for a duration of how long the business has been in business.
Mm-hmm.
Would that be too specific, or is that singling out one too much?
No, that's where I corrected myself. That's completely neutral. So what that is going after is businesses that, are potentially well established within Cannon Beach. And that's a policy decision. If the city council wants to, make that one of the criteria, so it just needs to then apply that criteria in a neutral fashion.
Okay.
And the reason for that particular criteria was we didn't want to create a situation where somebody could come up with a business, apply for a grant, and then disappear. So we wanted to make sure that at least 5 months that they were in business here.
Would there be a certain amount of time a certain base of time that we would require a business to have been in Cannon Beach?
December 31st, 2019.
The discussion over whether a business that is applying for a grant from us has also received or is applying grants from other locations. If we try and take that into account, how do we verify that a business says they have or have not got a loan from the state or got a loan from the feds or someplace else? And how should that apply to our situation? Robin?
Bruce, do you want me to take that one?
Sure. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm trying to get some discussion.
So I think that one we can handle, we can discuss different ways to handle it. You know, one thing that we're gonna do, I'm pretty sure that we're gonna do is just ask that anybody applying for these sort of grants, you know, certify that everything that they're providing us in their grant application is truthful. And if not, if we later find out that, you know, aspects were not truthful, then the city would be able to, you know, repossess or get the funds that they used back. We'd have to investigate, you know, different ways to, if we wanted to go through and verify each piece of information that's provided to us. And I'm sure that we could.
Okay, that's helpful, but I want to add a nuance to that is, do we care as a policy whether somebody is being aggressive and getting other grants?
Don't you think, this is Robin, don't you think it would be hard at this point to really have definitive answers on that, because this is such a new situation? And I know that a lot of people that are applying are finding out that they're going to have to reapply because they got kicked out of the process just because it was new and didn't work well at the time. So I'm almost thinking it shouldn't be something that we wait very much because it's such an unknown.
Good. I agree with that, actually.
My impression is, this is Councilor Ogilvie, that many more people will have applied and may or may not get the funds. And, you know, do you make it a criteria that somebody had simply applied and then deny them funds?
I'm not sure that we should necessarily tie whatever grant we decide we want to give to whether or not somebody has applied for other grants. They're going to need money. If we can provide some support, I don't think it needs to be tied to anything else they've gotten.
Good. Yeah. That I totally agree with. I don't feel, our job is to make sure that we still have businesses at the end of this thing. I think that's the important part. So whatever we can do to help, if we can try and help, this is our way of helping. Whether we weigh other grants and loans, I agree. I don't think that's important. Another aspect of this is, Robin?
Yeah.
Oh, you keep popping up, so I'm just curious if you're trying to speak in.
Oh, no.
Okay, just checking.
Thank you.
How the situation has affected businesses, that seems to be a couple of concerns in the application. How do we judge one business from the other, and how their situation is different than somebody else's?
Well, certainly, Councilor Ogilvie, I think it's important to find out whether they have employees, how they've been able to keep the employees, and then also, of course, you know, the rent burden that's upon them. Those are just some immediate things that come to my mind that we could use to prioritize the criteria.
Okay, I would add to that whether they've been able to operate partially, 10% operation, or something much more dramatic. I don't know, as versus to 100% closed down.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be important. Whether the effect on their business is kind of asked on the application statement that seems kind of an opinion that they might make. And I wouldn't want to make a judgment on an opinion from an applicant.
No, I agree with that, Sam.
Have we decided whether or not we want to supply just basic grants, or we're going to apply, give support on a different basis? In other words, are we going to give 5,000 to one and 2,000 to another, or are we going to do a straight across certain amount of grant with a cap on it?
Okay, I feel like, you know, the larger businesses are going to need more than some of the smaller businesses. So I would try and discuss the idea of maybe 3 categories, X, Y, and Z, size, medium, small, and allocate our funds to those 3. I would have to divide it somehow so that we know, you know, there are X amount of hotels, there are X amount of restaurants, and there are X amount of shops and other tourist-related industries. How do we divide the pot of money that we've got into those? I think that's going to have to be some sort of formulation. And then from there, within those 3 categories, the number of applicants gets divided. Mike's idea.
Mm-hmm.
So if we had like 10 restaurants, to put a round number on it, and we allotted, like, so then we would allot a certain amount of money for that particular category and then divide those 10 restaurants into that amount of money that we allocated. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So if I took it to numbers, if we got the $300,000 that we've got, and we divided it to 3 $100,000 chunks, and 10 restaurants got the one middle chunk, I don't know, something like that. Yeah. Mike, are you still there? You're oddly quiet.
Yeah, I'm listening for a change.
Okay, just checking. Let me go back to the dollar amount. I don't know if we've talked about that yet, but we have the $302,000 pot that we were discussing. To divide that openly, just to applicants, if we only had 10 applicants, that's substantial. I would put a minimum and a maximum on it, maybe, so that it doesn't get too low. And, you know, we get 100 or 500 applicants and we only get, you know, it divided down.
Well,
I
I
think-
see
Robin?
this is Robin. I see that possibly any money that might, you know, that'll be up to the committee as a suggestion for us, but if there is leftover money from one of the categories, maybe that could be used or put back into the commission for promotion when we are out of this problem.
Yeah. That also
So
brings
if you gave a,
that brings up the topic of, do we want to put the whole 302,000 into the grant process? Do we want to save out a little bit for the DMO for later on, or do we want to something like that?
Well, I had understood at last week's meeting, Councillor Ogilvie here again, that we may hear back from Jim Pano about he was going to question the membership about something like that? Am I misremembering it?
No, that sounded familiar, and I'm probably a good time, but if Jim would like to speak, maybe we could ask him to step up. Bruce, is he there or is he on the phone?
Oh, Jim is not here.
Okay,
He's on the call though.
He's on the call, Rusty's trying to find him. And we did get some information on Friday. I don't know if we got a final today, but it's on me that I did not forward that information to you. So hopefully Jim can give you an update.
Jim, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Hi, Jim.
Okay.
We did get quite a few responses to the survey. I haven't reviewed it today. I was sidetracked by a bunch of other duties that came up today. I will get the final results of everything today, and I'll send that over to Bruce so you can see all those numbers. But I did give Bruce a preliminary results as of last Friday. So the only thing missing in that will be what we, the people that responded over the weekend. But I can get that to Bruce as soon as possible, maybe even before this meeting's over, but certainly by the end, it'll be in his hands tomorrow morning at the latest.
All right, Jim, I appreciate that. Can you possibly give us an update from memory? Or do you have the, what you sent on Friday available to you?
Let me see if I can pull it up real quick and you guys can talk for a minute and I'll wave my hand or whatever function I can from here to let you know when I have that info.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Some of what they have might readdress our concerns.
This is Mike Dunfield. Let me make a comment about dividing the classes of businesses and allocating a certain percentage to each one.
No, not loud enough, talking to
Bruce just scooted me away from the microphone. I don't know why. I think
tried to aim it at him.
I think he's cross-eyed and thought I was not speaking into it. Any rate, if we, in advance, decide categories, say it's 3 categories, hotels, restaurants, and others. If we decide in advance what those will be, we could end up with some really strange numbers depending on the number of applicants that come in each one of those. I do like the idea of splitting it up into categories, but I think the staff or committee should wait until they see how many applicants are in each one of those categories before determining the quantity of dollars that would go into each pot. Just a procedural thing that I think would make it more equitable.
I'm a little, I think the criteria need to be set up clear before we even put out the application. That seems very important to me. I wouldn't want somebody to apply thinking they're applying for $5,000 and wind up with 2 or, something, or to be put into a different section, not knowing. I think we need to have the criteria well set before we put this out on the floor, you might say.
Well, and
Right?
Yeah, I agree with establishing the criteria. I think to determine what percentage of the 300,000 goes in the pot is premature. I can see a situation where you had a dozen applicants in the one category, and they ended up getting $15,000 each, where somebody in one of the other categories that had loads of applicants ended up with much less. And that was not the objective of dividing it up into the different categories.
I agree with that. I would put caps, a minimum, maximum for what, so if the situation was that only 12 applicants applied in one category, they could only get up to the maximum, whatever we set. We'd have to calculate those numbers, and I would need, to get an idea of how many businesses are in each category potentially for application.
I think putting a cap on each section would help a lot. But then it gets back to Robin's comment, if in doing that, we don't allocate all of the funds, it's unlikely that would happen, but if we didn't, then we'd have a balance, then what do we do with that? And I think suggestion was, make that available to the TAC for, future, promotion or projects.
I think, we could also keep in mind that a second round of grants afterwards, once we know we've got June, we've got July yet to go, and they could be just as hard. We don't know yet. And it might be a good idea to actually save a little bit in case this bug rebounds. So I like the idea of potentially having some leeway. Anybody else?
I kind of like the idea of the second round of grants, at least to put it aside and see if we even have enough to do that. But it would be nice to set it aside and not make any designation that it's going to go to, advanced promotion or anything. Just leave it there for a while to see what we want.
Okay. Jim, are you? I don't know how we're going to know whether Jim, oh, here you go.
I'm here.
Are you ready yet?
Well, I have the report pulled up, so I can kind of give you the quick overview of those.
Okay.
So, predominantly it's restaurants, retail, and accommodations that have are the bigger categories. Arts, of course, is there too. There's 63 responses.
Wow.
Majority of these are full-time employees of less than 5. So there's that factor. But the real question we wanted to kind of get the answer for you was, what was of the 4 different options, what was the most important? And grant funding by far was the leader in that category. And then the other 3 are kind of about the same distance back. Those are kind of dependent on the industry, where grant funds, I think, can be applied to all businesses. TLT deferment, of course, would only matter to the hotels. Utility relief matters to the people that pay their utility bills, probably the smaller businesses. And then the tourism marketing was kind of right grouped in there as well. So grant funding was by far the most requested item of the 4. And if I was to rank those 1 through 4, it would be grant funds 1, utility relief 2, tourism recovery marketing 3, and TLT deferment 4. But again, I think those are really kind of geared depending on what industry you're in. But grant funding applies to everybody.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
Mhm.
63 responses. That's good too.
And the 63 responses actually represents far more than that, because we have many businesses that, like Martin North, for example, has 5 different businesses. And then you talk to the lodging or the property management companies that manage 40 or 50 homes, depending on which company. So I believe that's well over half of our membership that has responded in total. So it's a pretty good response.
Jim, this is Brandon. What is your total membership?
We're at gosh, I wish Buddy could answer this. She knows it to the number, but we're at 340, I believe.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Do you have a sense of how many more businesses aren't members?
Not really. We don't, there's a lot of businesses that apply to the city for permits that come in and do maybe one job or are here for a short time. I feel like we have a really good membership base as far as the hospitality sector goes. I think we've got most hospitality businesses involved. So what businesses are out there that aren't members, I'm not sure what that number looks like.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's really helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to point out one fact too about the TLT being the lowest number of our survey. It's also the lowest number of businesses, I think, in a group. I think we have, maybe restaurants might be right down there as far as total number of businesses in a category. So that's why I think some of those numbers are a little skewed one way.
Okay. Does any of the council have any other aspects to the criteria that we have not touched upon that we should?
Councillor Ogilvie here, not at this time, Sam.
Okay. Bruce, do you want to comment a little bit on what the team that you've put together might come up with in your schedule?
I think I gave you the schedule in the email that I sent. Trying to find it. Anyway, yes, we were trying to get this done so that the checks could go out around March 5th.
I mean, May 5th.
I'm sorry, thank you. Yes, it would be May 5th. So that was the intent, and but this was a pretty aggressive schedule. It includes a meeting, tomorrow to develop things, have another meeting on Monday, and then have applications due on Tuesday. We give people about a week. I think under other circumstances, we might give longer, but I think that this is, people that are eligible will know about this process. And we also are trying to make the application something that could be filled out in like an hour, so that it doesn't become one of those real complex ones that somebody says, the heck with it, it's not worth it. So we were trying to make that part of it easy. Actually, from what I'm hearing, well, first of all, what the folks that we pulled together, I'm calling that a team because we were doing the work on the administrative side, and we were providing some information to council. If the council decides to take the process, which would be totally appropriate, then I think you would have to make appointments of your own. Maybe these folks would all be willing to do it. So, but I think you would need to make the appointments and set the terms for what you expect out of the process. Any questions?
One question I have, this is Robin. It seems like a very ambitious schedule. And if in fact we have as many applicants as Jim had responses, this might need a little more time when they're trying to review everyone. I know that when I was on the Tourism and Arts Commission, I think we had 2 days where we took time to look at all those things. But and I'm not suggesting that if people think that they can do it quickly, that they should. But it'd be nice to know if this is a lot to ask so quickly.
Well, the
I
folks that
share
were
those
working on-
concerns.
The folks that were working on the team, they were the ones that set the schedule. And in fact, the Tuesday, the applications are due. Wednesday, we would have a chance to review them. Thursday and Friday, we would set aside for meeting and doing the evaluations.
Okay.
Now, this is if it's administrative. If it goes and you have a committee that is reporting to council, it would probably be, maybe if you do it this fast, I don't know.
Would
I
the,
don't see how it could go, if we
Would
do
the-
it to council because of notifications, if nothing else. It'll all be public meetings.
And we could set that schedule up in advance, if everybody agrees to a time, so we could post all those, we wouldn't have to post it one at a time.
Nancy?
would the council have to approve the recommendations by the committee, or would this be strictly the committee's decision?
We can set it up anyway. Again, one of the criteria that I set for the team is to try to get this done as quickly as possible. And we're hearing from people now. So you may or may not agree with that criteria, but this was set up originally as an administrative function with approval of the concept from the council. But it'd be very easy if the council wants to have the final say on that, we would just convert it from recommendations. Convert it to recommendations to the council instead of making a decision on with the quickest turnaround is what we're looking at.
So can I mention a couple things about timing? So we talked about some changes that we may need to make to the city code. So, my recommendation is that we do an emergency ordinance in order to implement parts of this program. To do an emergency ordinance, we need to have that ordinance available 7 days ahead of time, and then we would have to have a unanimous vote, 2 unanimous votes by the city council at a meeting.
Right.
Did everybody get that?
Not really. It sounds like you have to wait you have to have the ordinance written and then 7 days to publish it. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Apparently I'm coming through jargle. Yes, you have to have the ordinance noticed and on the website for 7 days. And then you have a city council meeting where it's an emergency ordinance, which requires 2 unanimous votes.
If we were to establish this solely under Bruce's auspices as a staff decision, could we get that done next week when we have our regular meeting?
So
Sam, we don't meet for 2 weeks, Sam.
Oh, I thought we did. Okay.
No, but I will probably be asking for a meeting sometime next week so we can make decisions on the ordinance and the resolution prior to sitting down on May 5th. So it is possible we will put together a meeting, but the May 5th meeting is 2 weeks away.
can I make a recommendation? Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So my recommendation, if the council's interested in going this direction, is to have staff draft an ordinance to set up the program and then a resolution implementing that, and have staff make recommendations to the city council regarding what the program would look like, including establishing the criteria, the application, and in the committee making either recommendations to council for final decisions or final decisions appealable to council. And that could happen, as early as late next week. So, Bruce, staff, and I can draft an ordinance, tomorrow, the next day, get that on the website, and then work on the resolution implementing the program and have that to you for a meeting Wednesday or Thursday of next week. Bruce, does that sound okay?
It depends on how you define staff. If it's the team that's currently working on it, and if it's going to be a recommendation to council, then I think we need to go through a process where they get appointed. I don't think that the only way that we could get this done was with the help of those people. And so there's no way that staff will be able to go ahead and pick this up.
Okay. Then tonight, the council can vote to establish a subcommittee to work with you, Bruce, to develop that criteria. And I think as we discussed, that subcommittee would be subject to public meetings laws. And so that subcommittee could meet, this week in order to start drafting that program.
And that would be,
Well,
no,
sorry.
go ahead.
I mean, the issue with that is that the subcommittee is meeting before the ordinance is in place, developing the program, which, isn't terrible. So, the subcommittee can meet in an advisory capacity. If we're going to have this program, here would be the criteria. And so I guess that would be okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think conceptually, I have a little bit of a concern because if the recommendation includes advisory folks or some of the people that have asked to help, and then that recommendation goes to council, it seems like that is a subcommittee. The intent is all of us to go ahead and put this together for council consideration.
Okay,
But
so Bruce, what is your alternative timeline then?
without looking at what it would take from a meeting standpoint, and I would need some time. There's another aspect, and maybe everybody's on the phone that's on the committee. I don't know if they've not applied to work on a subcommittee for the council, so I don't know if you could just appoint them tonight without them giving a nod. But I think that Carolyn's here, Barb Knopf is on the line. I know Jim is on the line. Another person that's working on it is Kelly Ennis. You would probably want to appoint somebody to take her place because I don't think it's appropriate for a staff member to be on a council advisory group, although she would still help. So probably, I don't know, however long it would take to appoint, and then however long it would take for everybody to get through this, and then the council to make their decisions.
Let me chime in here because what I was asking, I think, is I'm trying to avoid establishing a whole second subcommittee or a new subcommittee or anything like that. If Bruce gathers a group of people, they help him create the criteria, he brings us the criteria, we are the ones that make the decision. Can we just do it that way? Do we have to have a whole committee formulated to make a recommendation?
So the reason is that's essentially having a group of people make a recommendation to council. So, and again, it's an action call. It could work.
So it's still a subcommittee under the public records laws.
Okay.
So anytime you assign a group of people to make an official recommendation to council that are not staff, that would be a subcommittee of the governing body.
Okay, just checking.
This is Mike. Then wouldn't each of the meetings with this subcommittee be a subject to public meeting law?
Yes.
They would, but I said earlier on though, if we determine a schedule, then we won't have a problem with advertising because we can just do everything in advance.
So Bruce and the council, for the record, I would be happy with more time. So my timing recommendation was to meet Bruce's concern about getting this done quickly. I mean, I think the best case scenario is to take additional time. So Bruce, if you're comfortable taking additional time, we could establish the subcommittee at a different meeting, and then from there, have the ordinance in place or the ordinance noticed for adoption at a meeting next week or the week after that, and then get the subcommittee in place and the subcommittee working on the criteria. Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm not. First of all, I think that my recommendation, and it's just that, to move quickly, is to the council. The council doesn't have to meet my expectation if they think that taking a little bit longer is better than going quicker, then that's my direction. So I don't want anybody to make a change as a result of what my thoughts are on this process. I think, to me, that I'm trying to work through it in my head, is the appointment of the group. I don't know if that's something we can do tonight. We usually do it by resolution. But if that's something we can do tonight, then we can go ahead. We can find when the minimum advertising time is. And then we'll have our first meeting. But I think that we'll probably, because there's several steps in this, we'll have to have different steps with the council. Like, once we do the eligibility, which you folks talk about a lot, then we're going to talk about the specific criteria, how we apply with and we talk about the application. So I think that there will be some back and forth on it. So I think it will take more time, but if trying to have the council agreeing on all of those points, which makes sense, then we just have to accept it's going to take a little bit more time.
Right. So for my part, I would be comfortable with the council, passing a motion tonight, establishing a subcommittee to begin researching and to begin making recommendations on this topic. Again, we haven't passed the ordinance, but there's no reason the council can't start investigating in case they do pass the ordinance.
Good.
Well, I think we need to go as quickly as possible. So if the first, if we have to make a motion to create a subcommittee tonight, then I so move.
Second.
Can I make, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to make a little bit more precise motion, or recommend a little bit more precise motion. So Colleen, are you there? Bruce?
Yes.
Okay. So my recommendation would be a motion to authorize Bruce St. Dennis to form a subcommittee to develop recommendations for criteria for the business assistance, for a potential business assistance program.
I so move.
Okay.
And I'll second.
Motion's made as Ashley stated. Any discussion on that motion?
Sam, I just have a couple questions. There's 3 non-staff members there. Do we need to get a total of 5? My concern with 3, if all of those agree, and we don't have more, is that if one of them's not there, I guess we have a quorum, I don't know.
So Bruce, I think we should be clear on who is on the subcommittee. So who are the identified people?
The ones that I'm working with currently is Barb Knott, Carolyn Probst, and Jim Pano. When 5 people meet, it includes me and Kelly Ennis, but I don't think, we will staff the function, but I think that the nature of the situation changes in that staff members should not be part of the appointees.
Okay, so are you saying,
Councilwoman,
are you saying there are 3 voting members? So Barb, Carolyn, and Jim?
I'm saying that's what there is now. I don't know what we have to have if we're going to appoint a subcommittee. I don't know if we can get by with 3. They agree, that would be fine. But if,
So you could have a subcommittee of 2 if you wanted. So a subcommittee of 3 is fine. A subcommittee of 5 is also fine.
Okay. We haven't voted yet. We could amend the motion to specify 3 so that it's clear that there are 3 voting members.
I'll agree to an amendment.
Okay.
Bruce, are you saying that you only want Barb, Carolyn, and Jim to be voting members? Or are you and Kelly also going to be voting on the recommendation?
Now that the nature of it has changed to a kind of reporting to council, I don't know what the rules are for that. Does it have to be a 5? Plus the 3 have not agreed to go ahead and take this different tack. So I'm just trying to think of what the aspects are of trying to go ahead and set it up.
Let me just clarify something. Ashley, the motion was to establish a committee, a subcommittee. Maybe they could formulate that themselves in the process of making the recommendation.
Right. You make a good point, Mayor. The motion was actually to authorize Bruce to form a subcommittee.
All right.
So I think it would be fine if we left it at that, and then Bruce could form the subcommittee. The law that we're dealing with here is the public records laws. So there's not, the public records laws are open as long as if the council is delegating authority to make a recommendation to a group of individuals, those group of individuals have to meet in public. That's the only legal requirement that we're talking about. There's no laws about, how many people or what they're delegated to do. All we have to be sure of is that that group meets in public.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. The amendment did not get a second, so let's ignore that.
Yeah.
Drop that. And if there's any concerns about the motion, as Ashley defined it just now, so Bruce can set up a subcommittee to recommend to the council.
Are we in discussion phase still, Sam?
Yeah,
Okay, my recommendation is to go ahead and follow basically what you said. My recommendation would be to have at least 5 members on the committee.
Do you have any suggestions as to how you want that set up? Do you want like 3 local residents plus 2 staff members, or do you want the whole committee to be?
Well, no, to Bruce's point, I didn't think it would work well with staff being on voting members.
Mhm.
If the rest of you feel comfortable with just 3 voting members of the committee, I guess I'm okay with that. I just thought maybe at least 1 or 2 more might be helpful from the community.
I'm comfortable with 3. I'm trying to address Bruce's concern about urgency. I don't quite feel the same urgency, but I think these folks need to be able to function rather quickly. And it would, the way we've set it up, Bruce could literally say, I need a couple more, and bring it to us and say, we need some more folks.
Okay.
I agree that, this is Robin, that I think the 3 that have been selected are very efficient and will act quickly. And I really have a lot of faith in all 3 of them. So I think they're a very good choice.
Okay, with that said, Colleen, do you want to call the roll on this motion?
Counselor Ridley,
Yeah.
Counselor Ogilvy,
Yes.
Counselor McCarthy,
Yes.
Council President Benfield,
Yes.
Mayor Stivel,
Yes. Okay, motion passes. So Bruce has got some folks to work with. The recommendation will be coming back to us with some ideas or a way to proceed. I think the way you've done it so far, Bruce, that sent us the application requirements, I sent you some comments. I would like to be informed on how the process is working so that we can maintain some comments before the meeting, just on a one-on-one kind of situation. That might help so that we don't jump into a second meeting and make this last too much longer. Any other comments by anybody else?
Well, I think we do need to keep ahead of it and do it as quickly as possible, because from what I understand is a lot of these businesses are getting very, very tight on money if they haven't already just lost it. So we need to make sure that we are there to support them, which means that I think the council needs to be available to meet, to make decisions as much as they're needed. So I think we, don't say we're going to meet in 2 weeks to our regular meeting. If we need to meet a lot sooner than that, we should be available and be flexible.
I agree with that, Nancy, and I'm available.
Yes, I do too.
Okay, we will have a special meeting when we need it. So stay tuned. I do have,
So on that topic, I'm also understanding that you're giving direction to staff, draft an ordinance for your consideration to establish this business assistance program with these funds. And I'm going to work with Bruce to have this done. Bruce, when do you think we can get that ordinance done, drafted?
I'm thinking that is it possible for this group, if they choose to accept the responsibility, to meet tomorrow, if they have a longer notice? I'm looking at Colleen.
So the ordinance would be to,
the council to meet, or?
No, this group is advisory to, whoever's on it is advisory to council. The meetings have to be noticed. What's the quickest we can get a turnaround?
24 hours.
That's what I always thought,
Okay.
24 hours.
So then, instead of meeting on Tuesday, we might be able to meet, people are available, and people agree to do it, on Wednesday. it may be possible that in order to keep it moving, we would be far enough along, to have a meeting on Thursday. So that you can look at it. I think that even with the conversation we've already had, that you need to see this, you know, in small steps as we go, rather than get to the end and say that's not what I wanted. So I would ask, you know, tentatively, we set a meeting for Thursday. For the council,
With the council on Thursday
yes.
of this
And
week?
then what I would ask folks to meet on Wednesday, and a separate, task would be to develop the ordinance you're talking about. Actually.
Okay. Okay, well, my original point was, as soon as we get this ordinance drafted and posted, we will likely ask for a meeting of the council 7 days after that.
Okay. That's for the ordinance. Yeah,
Mhm.
okay. Everybody understand all that?
I'm a little confused. Are we thinking about meeting on Thursday
Yeah.
for something? What is, we're going to be discussing?
Thursday, just for an update on what the committee will be doing so that we're not running into a timeline, because the ordinance takes 7 days. So that we have some time in between, just in case we have issues or input for the criteria and requirements and qualifications, that kind of stuff.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay,
And specifically, I want to make sure that you see it at every step,
right,
so that we don't get far ahead.
right.
Okay.
I have a kind of a personal question. This is probably directed specifically to Ashley. Considering the fact that I have I think I'm the only council person that has a tourist related business. That might be, well, an issue if I were to apply. Could I?
So yes,
Yeah.
so this is a conflicts of interest question. So, you know, there's two types of conflicts of interest. There's actual and potential conflicts. So some of the answer to your question will be based on how the program is laid out. But if you are considering applying for the program, at a minimum, I would consider that a potential conflict of interest. And with a potential conflict of interest, you can participate, or you just need to announce your conflict, and then you can go ahead and participate.
Okay.
If it is an actual conflict of interest, then that would be, you would have to announce your conflict, and then you can't participate in any discussion or any decisions regarding the program or the delegation of funds. So we would need to talk, and we would need to look at the program. And then, because the liability for conflicts of interest is personal rather than a city liability, I would advise you to talk to the Oregon Ethics Commission, and they'll answer your questions directly. Again, because I represent the city and not counselors or officers individually, I
Right.
can't necessarily give you specific advice about that.
Okay, but it could not inhibit our formulation of the process. It's after the process. So
Well,
we're in that.
again, I'm going to advise you to talk to the Oregon Ethics Commission before we vote, before any item is up for vote.
Okay, thank you. Somebody else? Okay. At that point, we have a second topic that we were going to discuss. If we feel like we're concluded with this topic, and that was, the second topic was the deferrals. Bruce, did you want to start that, or does anybody want to chime in?
I'll start with it. As of, I think it was Friday, out of 59 folks in the motel category, 28% had paid. That's 47%. There were 3 additional hotels that filed paperwork but did not have a check accompanying whatever they submitted. So, I guess technically that they replied that they've not paid the tax that they say they owe. The total of the 24 is $89,000 so far. There are 6, which are the ones that are the bigger ones. And, like I said, we paid the 28 have paid $89,000. The 6 that I'm referring to, could be as high as $350,000. And only one of them has actually filed but not paid. Another one has, I think, 3 properties, but they have had conversations with us regarding deferral, and I think they're waiting for your answer on that tonight. What is important for the decision now is that you're kind of placed in the position that there are a large number of people that actually collected the tax. They're not paying the tax, they collected it from people that were staying here. And that is what we're hoping to get by April 15th to sustain city operations. And so it does put us a little bit behind if we do decide to defer. I think that if you do decide to defer, we need to look at the situation as far as what is a realistic idea of when we might be paid. And what I'm talking about is that if we defer, say, for 3 months from April 15th, none of us really know, but I think it's possible that we might be in business some June 1st. And so that means if they don't have the money now, would they be able to make enough money to pay July 15th for quarter 1, which is one we just finished, which is January to March, plus the April to June category. And if we talk about that, I think you need to think about how realistic that is and look at the possibility that we might be looking at another deferral situation. Also, there's how do you from a fairness standpoint, you have 28 that have paid. That means the other 31 would be deferred. Do we allow people to take that money back so they're all treated the same? So I guess those are my considerations when you're looking at the idea of deferring.
Okay, discussion.
This is Councilor Ogilvie. Bruce, have you spoken with any of the hoteliers that have not paid?
The one that has 3 properties we have spoken to. One of the others had sent us a form letter saying that they didn't want to pay the utilities until October. And then one of them did file, but didn't include a check and did not include an explanation.
I just feel like, if this were any other kind of business, that we would make an attempt to collect the debt, and that if the debt cannot be collected, we establish some type of schedule to collect it.
So if I could add one piece to Bruce's comments. Under the city code for taxes that are not paid, or delinquent taxes, the city has a 10% penalty for those taxes not paid within the first 30 days. And at the 31st day, the penalty raises to 25% of the tax not paid. And then in addition, the city code provides for 1.5% interest per month.
Didn't we talk last time about potentially allowing a deferment until July 15th?
That was part of the discussion.
Well, if we do allow a deferment, we should have them sign an agreement that they do plan to pay at that time. And then we have to also discuss whether or not we want to add any penalty to that or not.
One
They also
suggestion,
That-
one suggestion from the city is if the council does consider deferment, that it's a good idea to require the hotels to turn in a tax return now. And so we can put together those agreements. So we need to know now what the tax that you owe us is, and then we'll be able to have that agreement. So it's not like you don't send us anything until July, get information up front.
I think if we are going to do any deferrals at all, they should have a week to turn in the paperwork, which was due on April 15th.
Yeah, that was what I was hoping, is that we could give like a 5-day window for people that haven't paid to pay. Because I would think that if they haven't paid, would that reflect at all on any grants that are being given to anyone?
It wouldn't reflect necessarily on the grants, Robin, but it's funds that are going to put us in a position where we will need to tap the reserve more quickly than we might otherwise. And it's not necessarily grants, but this is tax money that the city will not receive on a timely basis. So these are things that we would use for the day-to-day operations of the city. We have a good reserve, it's not a great reserve, but a good reserve, so we would be able to absorb 3 months. Where I come from on this.
Yeah, another aspect of this is the folks who have already paid on time and correctly. I think just thinking about how to make that fair, it would be to a one-time deferral so that the folks that need to defer now who have not paid would get a chance to do it now. And those that have paid could defer the next time. I'm not advocating this. I'm just saying that they would have a chance to then defer for the following quarter or time period, or however we decide to sort this up. Just so that they had that opportunity that they could have had if we'd have been making this decision before they actually already paid. It gets confusing. I do also feel
right.
that
Yeah.
those folks that have kind of muddied up the problem by not at least submitting their reports and paying properly might have, in my sense, made it a harder decision for us to defer. That's just my take on it.
Sam, with the point that you made about somebody that's paid deferring like the next period, we are in that period, so that would be a deferral of what would be due on July 15th. And that's okay, I'm just trying to tell you how
Okay.
this works out.
Yeah, and that's, those that are trying to defer the third quarter now can, under this definition, could defer now. Those that want to defer the fourth quarter, which we are in now, could defer that one. I guess that's what I'm just saying.
Correct.
Okay,
Understood. And also, I think that, if folks don't pay on the next round, my recommendation would be that the conditions in our code kick in from that point forward.
Yeah.
Also, it's a concern when people are making decisions when they'll pay and when they won't. So I think that we need to have a strong policy going forward that the TLC funds, which they collect from others, are due on the 15th or whatever that quarter is, and that we move forward with what's in the code to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
okay,
One way to prevent it happening is to have them submit monthly instead of quarterly. That way they don't float for 3 months and then say, uh-oh, we spent it.
I think, yes, that is a possibility. I think that, I believe Seaside does it that way. I would just from a paperwork standpoint, it would be, this happens 4 times a year for us to handle all that money, and then it would become 12. So we might want to take a look at that as to if there's really a significant impact on finance. But that is a possibility, and it's done by other communities.
It could just be done to force people to be honest, forthright, and pay their taxes. We shouldn't have to do that.
I think that is an important discussion we should have. It's kind of out of ways that we need to talk about it. I'd rather not talk about it during a situation like this, but I agree. I think a different payment plan could be important for us in the future. Okay, then, if there's no other comments, we're running out of topics.
Do we need to have a motion on the deferment?
Yes, so let me talk about the city's options. So if the city does nothing at this point, if the council, wants to keep the status quo, what would happen is that the city would start sending out its delinquency notices to those that have not paid. The 10% penalty would apply, and those that did not pay after 31 days, the 25% would apply, as would the interest. The interest can only be waived by an ordinance from city council, making a decision that would not apply. So again, if we did nothing, the interest and penalties would accrue for those who did not pay. If the city wanted to make changes, then I would recommend that you provide direction to council to bring back an ordinance establishing a deferral program or waiving the interest or something of that sort.
Anybody?
Well, let me see, so Ashley, just so I understand, from the action that can be taken tonight, can the council provide direction to? All right. Can the council take or provide direction to staff to defer or not defer? I mean, how can all this go together? Because,
so the
people need to
council,
know if
so if the council wants to change how it's currently doing its transient lodging tax collection, it would need to do so via an emergency ordinance because you're deviating from what's already established in the city code. So even if we're going to make these one-time changes, for this pandemic circumstance, we still should do that via an ordinance. So an ordinance needs to be noticed 7 days, and then if it's an emergency, 2 unanimous votes. So if the council is interested in that, the council should provide direction to city staff to start that process. Alternatively, the city council can say, we are happy with the established process already in the code, and that we're going to move forward with that process.
Okay. I'm going to throw in another little monkey wrench. Would it be possible that the council could consider only deferring a portion of what is owed?
Yes.
Would the council be willing to discuss that?
I'm certainly willing to discuss it.
I'm just throwing it out there as an idea that I came up with, and it could be if they paid something now, then they could defer a remainder. That would keep us a little more solvent, as the city is needing some of the funds also. Some of those funds should have been already collected, the January, February funds. I know there wasn't much in January, February, but there's something. And maybe that would be a way to ask the hotels to commit some of the funds that are due, and then we could defer the remainder, and that would be on a case-by-case basis, maybe. I don't know. I'm throwing it out there.
Would it be fair to ask for half?
I don't know. I don't know the numbers well enough.
Robin, you're poking me in the side. It's not a matter of fair. They should just pay it. Now, I think it would be a kind gesture on your part to ask for half, but
It's not fair that they're withholding the tax.
yeah, that's the not fair part right there.
Yeah, the terminology of this whole thing is awkward because they're not paying the tax, they're transferring it from the customer to us.
And Robin, that was not being
Right.
critical of your comment. It was just that when you were talking about trying to be fair, which is great, it just kind of, I guess you know where I come from, so kind of being itch a little bit.
So I could provide a suggestion. If council's not interested in creating a deferment program, one of the things you could provide direction to Bruce to is for, city council to stay with the status quo, the process already established in your city code, and then direct Bruce to send out, notifications to those who are delinquent and give them 7 days in order to pay their tax, or, how many days you think is fair. And then Bruce can make a decision regarding whether to waive that 10% penalty for those who are delinquent at this point, if they pay within, additional 7 days of receiving the notice.
And understood that, because I think that if we're going to go ahead and not collect 10%, very big numbers, I would prefer the council make the decision, the call, and we would follow the direction.
Okay, and under the city code right now, that decision is delegated to the city manager. So it wouldn't need to be in an ordinance. So the council can just make that decision and provide that direction to Bruce without having to do an ordinance. Bruce, does that serve your needs?
Yeah, it does, but it seems it's just cleaner if they say we're going to defer, because if that decision is not made, then what we have is whatever is in the code, and it's pretty strong language, and so I would prefer to not go down that road and then have it changed later. And also want to be clear as far as what how we should handle the people who've already paid.
maybe, I'm sorry, I was not clear or cutting out. My suggestion was for the council not to have a deferment program, but to direct you to contact those who are already delinquent and give them an opportunity to pay before the penalty is imposed. Does that make sense?
penalty would- I think I do understand, but the time the penalty would be imposed is May 15th. There's just 1 month or 31 days, so I think it's around May 15th.
So there's two penalties. There's one penalty when you're immediately late. So if you're 2 days late, it's a 10% delinquency penalty. Then if you're 31 days late, another 15% is added for 25%. So at this point, how late are the people who have not paid?
From April 15th, so it's 5 days.
Okay. So again, this is a policy call, but it's just a suggestion of one potential way to handle it is to say, we're going to keep our code language as is, but for those people who are unsure whether the city was going to collect the tax, give them one more opportunity to pay it before we impose our penalty.
That would be with the city manager?
That would be direction the council could give the city manager.
Yes, and I would prefer that, because if council says no deferral, and then people don't pay by May 15th, and I don't impose the penalties, it is a deferral. And that means I'm kind of overriding the commission decision.
So the council has a decision, no deferral, partial deferral, or a full deferral. That we have to decide kind of first, and then when we decide one of those, we have to ferret out the details on how it works. I need any preferences? Anybody? I'm,
No deferral.
pardon, I couldn't hear that.
I said no deferral.
Okay,
Mike, did you say no deferral?
yes.
Okay.
That's right.
I'm leaning a little bit towards some sort of partial deferral so that we have some money flowing. Either whether it's Robbins 50/50 or some other sort of allocation, just to give the hotels a chance to make up the payment they need to pay, either for those that have not paid the current or those who have paid in the next or next quarter, following quarter.
I would support that, Sam.
Okay.
And I would too.
Okay, Nancy, do you have a
I,
preference?
yeah, I would support that. I'm almost leaning toward total deferral until July 15th. So as a compromise, I would support your suggestion.
Mike, could you work with that?
Would you repeat your proposal?
No. No, I would ask Bruce to sort out some sort of apportionment so that those that still need to pay must pay something, whether it's 50% or 20% or some percentage. And then the rest could be deferred to a future payment date. Set that up in the wording. I suppose that would have to be an ordinance, correctly? And then that we could vote on that, and that would take the 7-day timeline.
Yes.
Well, I guess I can't be comfortable with it, and I don't know what percentage or what date you have in mind. if you're talking, 50% now and the rest, with the end of
July
the
15th?
fourth quarter. You know, you haven't given me any numbers, so I guess I'm still of an opinion that any deferrals create problems for the city, problems that we're dealing with right now. How to be fair? The others paid their tax. And it wasn't out of, you know, they collected it and just haven't given it to the city. So I'm kind of hard nosed on this.
Can I make a suggestion?
Ashley?
So this is, again, this is a policy suggestion, but, so we still have a bunch of, hotels that under your city code have a delinquency penalty of 10% already imposed. So the council will also have to make a decision about whether that penalty will become due. So when you're talking about, you know, paying 50% now and 50% at a date certain in the future, would you be talking about just the tax that's owed? Or would those people also be subject to the penalty and interest on taxes not paid? And I throw that out there because first, it will need to be addressed in the ordinance. And second, if it's a compromise between, you know, those that did pay and those that didn't pay. Those that didn't pay, you know, aren't being required to pay ASAP, but they are subject to, you know, a penalty and interest.
Yeah, I understand. My take is that if we're doing deferral, why would we do any penalty? So that would be my take on that. If we're not doing deferral, penalty is that has to be in place. So,
Yeah, we're doing this for a special reason, and this is so unique. I don't think we should be taxing people for what they've paid within the time frame that we allow for this to be done.
right.
Okay, so if that is the decision of the council and we haven't heard for everybody, in the ordinance to be drafted, we would be clear that those who have not turned in their taxes would not be subject to the penalty in the city's code or the interest?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
We're trying to maintain our businesses so that they survive as best we can. I am a little upset that there's some of the folks that decided to try and push this, but I still feel that it's important that we try and save the businesses rather than penalize them during a disaster. I agree. I would like to hammer out the numbers now, but I also think it might be important for Bruce to have a chance to talk to a few folks to find out what numbers would be better to propose in the ordinance. That's why I'm not defining one specifically. The 50-50 was just thrown out there. One hotel might think 50-50 is workable, another one might not. If Bruce has a chance to call them and ask and see if that would work one way or better, a consensus might appear, and then it will come to us at the ordinance decision. If we want to tweak it, then we could.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I have a question. I don't think we need to penalize them either, but are we talking about a deferral for what I guess would be the first quarter or the third quarter, depending on which year you're talking about? Or are we allowing a one-time deferral for either quarter 3 or quarter 4?
Yes.
So they
That's
only
what-
get one
Yeah.
deferral.
In order to be fair, you have to,
Yeah, they only get
Yeah,
one deferral and
exactly.
decide which quarter it is.
right?
Okay.
Well,
Sorry.
I think if somebody paid their quarter three, then they should be able to defer quarter four for 3 months.
Right.
But I don't think somebody that didn't pay quarter three should also be able to defer quarter four.
No.
I have a proposal, if you're, my proposal is that we do go with the 50/50. I did misspeak. I said that it was due April 15th. It's not due till April 30th. So if they pay by April 30th to 50%, the ones that haven't paid. And then they would have until July 15th to pay, the other 50%, but, no deferrals after that. And, I think we just need to get out of the business of having them collect taxes for us and then keep them. So I would say that there, from a policy standpoint, no more deferrals other than 50% of quarter three. And if they don't pay on July 15th, then the terms of the code apply.
And I would accept that.
Okay, I've been writing down notes, and so I want to make sure that I've got it. So, this will be an ordinance. It will be a one-time, deferral on tax payments. And do I understand correctly that the hotel gets to choose whether or not they use it for taxes that are due April 30th or the next taxes, but they don't get both. So basically, one return in the year 2020, they can get a deferral on.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
Excuse me, I don't see a need to have consideration for deferral of quarter four unless it's somebody that's paid. So to give somebody, well, I guess if they're taking the 50%, then they've chosen quarter three.
okay,
but Bruce, the thing is that some people paid it, but really put themselves out to do it. And if it could be an equitable situation so that people who did put themselves in a bad spot to adhere to the rules shouldn't be penalized. And I feel they would be if they didn't have the opportunity the next quarter.
okay,
And Robin, I think we're saying the same thing, Robin, that if you deferred this, if you did not defer and you paid, then you have the
Yeah.
opportunity to defer quarter four. But if you didn't pay and
Okay.
you choose the deferral, which is 50%, then you don't get to defer again after that. You deferred in quarter three, and then the penalties would kick in if you don't pay by July 15th for either quarter three or quarter four.
Okay, I didn't hear you say that it could be one of, people could make that choice if they'd been a good citizen and paid on time. So,
Yeah.
okay. Can I keep going with the terms here?
Please, Ashley.
So you pick one of two quarters that you're able to defer. We're asking people to pay 50% of what they owe, within 7 days of the ordinance becoming effective. We also should require they enter into a payment agreement and turn in their last quarter tax returns. Because I understand from Bruce that for some of the hotels, we don't even know what the returns are. Is that correct?
That's correct, but one thing that we should absolutely do is have them do their returns within 5 days.
Okay.
We should
So
know what
then-
the numbers are.
So within 5 days, they turn in their returns and pay 50% of what they are. They'll enter into an agreement with the city to pay the other 50% by July 15th. We also will have to establish the consequences for not paying those. My suggestion would be that the consequences that now exist under the code would apply, which is the penalties and the interest. If you comply with this, then the city is not going to impose any of the penalties or interest for delinquent payments. Anything else?
Sounds good.
So for if somebody decides that they want to defer the fourth quarter, when would their payments be due?
Bruce?
I can check the
October
statute.
15th.
Would that be
Be
October?
October 15th it would be due, but they could not do that unless they paid by the end of April for the quarter three.
Yeah. Right, okay.
Okay, it sounds like we've got some marching orders there. Any final comments on this? Not hearing any. I know we only had 2 topics, but I'm going to add one more. Last minute is, did we feel like we want to talk about the utility credit or something? Does anybody still feel strongly about that one? This would be more.
Yes.
I apologize. I'm sorry, I did not list that. I only said there were 2. But that is the third, yes.
Yeah. Robin, you had something to say?
Well, I was just going to say that Jim had mentioned that it was a priority for his questionnaire. And so I want to honor that, that he's gone to so much work to get that information, and that was number 2 on his list.
That's kind of why I'm bringing it up. I know this would come directly from the general fund, so this is more of a unrestricted funds. So it digs a little deeper into what the city's operations are going to be.
I think we already,
One way to express this would be to really benefit the individual residents. They're not going to benefit from the business activity or actions we're taking. But if we deferred the water rate or the water bill for 3 months on 3/4 inch meters, in other words, covering small business and residents, then that would, but not the large business. They're already getting some assistance. But it's just a thought of helping some of the small and individuals that don't have a business, but they've still suffered through this whole thing. Their income sources may very well have tanked, like mine. So why not recognize that for the small resident? And I think, looking at Carol right now, I think the 3/4 inch meter would cover that. We don't have 1/2 inch meters, right? Okay, 3/4 inch meters, that's one way to capture it in our billing system and allow those to be deferred for 1 quarter. 1 quarter, 1 month, what appropriate time is, but it's one way to assist those residences that may be on fixed income and so forth.
I wholly agree on the 3/4 meter. You're saying deferring or credit?
No, I'm saying a deferral.
Okay.
Because of our concern with digging into the general fund, and I'm not sure that would alone force us to go out and borrow, but combination of all these different systems can put us in that category. That's my thoughts.
Mike, when you talk about a deferral, would this be something that would be offered to residents, not something that residents would necessarily have to take, right?
Yeah, I would just offer to that. That's a good point. Thank you. Offer them that option. There may be, a lot of people would prefer to just continue to pay it monthly rather than accumulate it and have to pay it, kind of all at one time. But it can help somebody that's in a, particularly tough situation in the next couple of months before they get rehired to go back to work.
Boy, I'd like to see us forgive a a $50, or give them a $50 credit for the residences. I think that would balance out what we're doing for the businesses, and then we would be giving something to the residents.
Well, that's a nice gesture, but the problem is that it's money out of our general fund, which we don't have a whole lot of to spread around. The one suggestion we received, I'm sure we all received a suggestion that we maybe credit people who really need that credit. And I'm not sure how you determine that, but that might be one way of compromising so that those who really need a credit could get it, and some of those who don't need it necessarily could go ahead and pay it.
Well, I
Thank
agree
you for
with
bringing
that.
that up, Nancy.
Let me throw in a little modification. If we were to defer for 3 months, if we were to defer payment, up and I would actually change the terminology and say turn it into a payment plan, so that folks could, for the remainder of 2020, pay what they can, and the rest goes into a balance. I think the water bill could just handle that. That would be just a simple process. Just do that for anybody that just feels like they need to pay less. Add a 3/4 meter. That would be the only difficult part, is how to establish that. But then that gives us, the council, a chance to readdress a credit sometime in the fall to help folks that are still, they've built up a balance that's kind of heavy. And maybe by that time we'll have a clearer view of what our funds are and how things have rebounded or not.
Yeah, and just to clarify one thing on the deferral, this isn't a quarterly payment, well, maybe it is.
It's monthly.
So, like, the first month would be deferred 3 months. The second month is also deferred 3 months. The third month, deferred 3 months. So that when it comes time to reimburse, they're not paying 3 months plus their current month. They'd just be paying 1 month plus the one deferred month. And they do that for an entire quarter.
Well, that works.
So
I
it
like that.
takes some of the sting out of it.
Without modeling that, that may take some funds from the general fund, but I don't know until we model it. But it won't be the same as if we did the $50 credit, it'd be less.
I'm wondering how this is going to work for billing people. Is that going to be a real complication for putting out the billing?
Carol explained it.
Yes, it will be difficult to administer.
So I want to bring up one point. You already have a provision in your utility code for delinquent payments. If you're delinquent on payment, you have the option to enter into a payment agreement where you can pay the delinquent payment for up to 1 year. And then there's an interest charge of 1% per month. So, I mean, to simplify things a little bit, those who are interested in deferring could enter into a payment agreement under the already existing city code language, and the council could decide whether or not it wanted to impose the 1% interest charge.
I want to point out that we've got probably the biggest hotel in town is requested to defer their utility payments till the middle of October. And so, I've heard reference to a 3/4 meter. I think that council needs to address, is it going to be just a 3/4? And then if it is just for the 3/4, are we going to take any other action on the request for utility deferral for October 15th? Got it. Check.
Okay.
I got a text from Lori Sari, our finance director.
Yeah.
She says, this is turning into an accounting nightmare.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, credit would be so much easier. You just, boom, credit. But I understand, and that's the process of helping folks out with a deferral or a payment plan is complicated. Any other comments on that? Do we want to move forward on it somehow?
Let me just make sure I understood, Ashley, and what our current regulations are. In essence, we have a payment plan. If you don't pay, after 30 days, you still owe it at 1.5%. You go 2 months, you still owe it, but now you owe another 1.5%. Is that correct? Right?
You're,
So, like for free, you only, it's not an outlandish charge. Look at all your other terms and conditions on loans and credit cards and all these things. So that could keep us right within our current, rate structure, I believe, and just allow people to take advantage of it and defer their payments and pay their interest, if they choose to.
My understanding of the process is you have to individually apply or contact the city and say, I want to do this. I could see that becoming a avalanche of people calling City Hall and, compounding things. We could, as a city council, just say a blanket approval of anybody who wants to do it. I would defer to Lori so that we get this done as efficiently as possible for the staff.
so I think Lori is actually on the call. I saw her at some point. Is there a way that she could join?
Bruce?
Yes, I can unmute her. She's on the line.
Please unmute
She's
it.
really tearing her hair out right now.
I guess I'm not going to speak for Lori, but I think there's going to be a lot of tracking of this anyhow. And it's going to, then the onus is going to be on the city to track down who has paid and who has not paid. So, essentially, on the city side, we're going to have individual agreements with each one of these people and then track them. So I wait to hear from Lori, but I'm not sure what the additional burden would be.
Are we talking about lodging operators now?
No, we're talking about water utility rates.
Okay, we're still on that.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I like the credit aspect better just because it's like a one and done. And you just kind of move on from there and you don't have to, because once you start deferring 3 months out, it compounds the impact on the customer. And it just kind of builds like a snowball, actually. I'm not sure that really does them any service.
Also, Sam, it's kind of like a catch-22. Either people call us and tell us they're going to take advantage of that, or they don't call us, they take advantage of it, and then we start putting them on the cutoff line or list.
That brings us back to a credit. 1 month credit was what, 87,000, something around there. Direct cost.
87.5, as I recall.
89 something, 89,000.
I think that was for all accounts.
What?
For all,
Would be fewer for just the residential.
I was gonna say, could we figure out a number for just the 3/4 inch pipes?
Yes, we can
Well,
do
we
that
have
tomorrow.
commercials that have to be reached too. We could run that, but I think we might have some commercials that are on 3/4. But whatever you want to do, we can do. But I think, again, I would hope that we do something that's more simple, than having to, track many multiples of, individuals on different payment plans. We're not set up for that.
And another aspect of this, and I'm not condoning it, I'm just saying that $50, the base rate was what we started with. We don't have to do that. We could do 40, 45, something that is substantial enough to really help folks, but you still have to pay a little bit of something. So,
So can we limit this, not just to 3/4 inch meters, limit it to residential? Is that available? If, that's the whole point to me, is to make this available to the residential people that don't have a business, they just had hardship, they're unemployed. I don't know that we need to give a $50 credit to a small hotel. Maybe they're on a 3/4 inch meter too, but they've got other sources to get help. So I've used 3/4 inch meters. I didn't think about the fact that we can identify residential use. But if you want to give a $50 credit to the residential users on their water bill, and if that works for Lori, and it's cutting into the general fund, which I really don't like to do. But it sounds like maybe that's a simple way to go about it. I don't know, about all I can say on that.
let me ask Lori, is that possible to narrow it down to just a residential use?
I think it might be. We'll have to look at the software tomorrow to see what our limitations are.
Okay. Bruce, could you send us all that kind of information as soon as Lori can put it together so that we can then, I'm getting a little rummy, so since, we don't really need to vote on this tonight, but it would be nice to be closer to a decision.
Yes,
Okay,
we'll send you the information when we have it. And
okay.
we'll send you the information that Jim Payne will put together for us.
Anybody else have anything else to add to this topic?
Yes, and I'd just like to, Councilor Ogilvy speaking, to find out what the city's current policy is on not turning off water for residents in the midst of this crisis.
We don't.
I have given direction to the Finance Department and Public Works that we will not turn off anybody's water during this time.
Thank you, Bruce.
Now, that doesn't mean that everybody can go ahead and not pay their bill and to get out of jail free card. Eventually, they got paid.
Yes, I understand.
Yes, sir.
Okay, with that, anything for a good of the order?
For the good of the order, I was hoping we could bring up something, and I don't know where this would fit at all, but for the food bank, I think I talked to Brandon about this this week, and we both, and I can't speak for Brandon without him saying his thoughts, but we sure feel that they have done a stellar job in providing for the community, and if there's any way that we can help that way, I sure would appreciate some thoughts on that.
And Robin, you're correct. Those are exactly my sentiments, and would like to bring up the same issue.
Is there any way,
Bruce here. I think that they're definitely doing a great job. There's also some other, organizations that are doing great work. And normally we would be starting our, process of doing a community grant. And, if you would like us to move forward with that process, through parks, or because of the budget situation that we're in, if, council wants to decide, because, the community grant is not something that I would like to see taken out of the budget for, the next fiscal year. But I think that we need to be very focused on, organizations that are helping those in need. So, provide you with direction on that sometime.
Nancy?
I'm just wondering, first I was gonna ask about if there's any way we could give the food bank a grant. But has the food bank received any community service grants in the past? I'm trying to remember.
No, they have not, and this is the first time they've applied.
And they have to apply for that, right?
Yes, yeah, that goes through, in the past, it's gone to Parks and Community Services, came up with a recommendation that was put in the budget, and actually the council discusses it before that. I just think that this year's budget is very different. We can go through that process, or if you want to, because ultimately y'all, as the budget committee, are going to be making the decisions on what stays in and what does not. So we can go regular process, or we can just bring it to you as part of the budget discussion.
The only problem I have with them going through the whole community services grant process is that it takes so long. I mean, they won't even get a check until September, October, and we're talking about need right now.
Yeah.
Those would be my concerns as well.
Based on your direction, we can provide whatever you would like on whatever schedule.
Could you repeat that first? I didn't understand you.
Based on what the collective wisdom of the council is, we can move forward with some sort of a grant, I believe, unless Ashley says otherwise, but we can go forward with the grant relatively quickly.
A grant just for the food bank or other organizations?
Both, but I think we were just talking about trying to do something for the food bank in a relatively short period.
Right.
And so we can, I don't know if it'd be a resolution or whatever, but we could put something together that would allow a check to be cut for the food bank at a denomination that you decide.
I'd like to see that go forward.
You know, normally, it's a good point, Mike. The first discussion we started with for the community services grant, that discussion would be funds that would come out of the upcoming budget year. So that would start after July 1st. I think we'll have to recognize that we don't know how much money we're going to have after July 1st. But if you wanted to do something more quickly for the food bank, then we would find the money out of what we have now.
I think more quickly is really important. It's an urgent thing.
Yeah.
That would be my concern as well.
If there is an agreement on an amount, we are going to be meeting at some point. I don't know if it'll be Thursday, but when we meet again, we can have whatever mechanism we need in order to make that grant now. If you can give us a denomination, I think we need to give folks a notice on what you're considering.
I guess I'd just like to see what the source of those funds are. It seems like it would help us determine what's available.
No, like it would come from, it would come from current funds, and it would impact the end balance, which pretty much has the same effect as if we took it from the general fund reserve, because we have the two of those together at the end. So if you wanted to move forward with that, that would probably come, and then the fund balance, which is already down pretty darn low, our anticipated ending fund balance, it could come from there. or again, a transfer.
Okay, thanks.
And if you're not ready to make the decision tonight, then the next time we meet, we can talk about this. We'll work with Ashley to see if it's possible to make that, determination at the, right at the meeting where they have the next discussion.
Yeah, I think it's a moving target what they need, because as I read what Lolly sent out, they were feeding 100 families. Now they're people, and now they're serving 360 some, and it's just been within a very short period of time. Barb Knopp would probably know more about that if she's online, but I think we need to look at it as if it might be something we need to work on a scale with as well.
Okay, how about if, either one of the counselors or me have a conversation with Barb Knopp and talk about what, might be helpful, and we can talk about what might be possible, and then bring that to the next meeting.
That'd be great.
I'm doing that so we don't put her on the spot tonight by unmuting her and say, Barb, what do you want?
Okay. Anything else for good of the order? Okay, then we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh, here we go. I want to thank